Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 1028 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today, Jenny and I are back with another In the Myth series, and today's episode is Jenny and I discussing the confusion between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. You know this one's going to be fun. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you're looking to support the podcast and help yourself at the same time, CozyEarth.com. Use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% on your towels, your sheets, and your comfortables. Quality stuff at a good price. CozyEarth.com. Then take 40% off and voila, you're wearing great gear on the discount. You can also get yourself some Omnipod products at my podcasty linky linker, omnipod.com/juicebox. Get in there. Get yourself a Dash or an Omnipod 5. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Dexcom, makers of the Dexcom G7 continuous glucose monitoring system. Learn more and get started today at dexcom.com/juicebox. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Forward here. Testing. There I am. Okay. Jennifer, we are almost finished with our myth episodes today.
Oh yeah,
we're very
almost. Close. We had what, like 52 pages of.
Well,
we're almost done.
We didn't read everything everyone sent in. It is really an incredibly long document and with very little repetition in it. But there's some things people say that you're like, oh, that means that. So I get to skip over that stuff.
Or a lot of people, like you said, I think the last time we talked, they repeat. And it's amazing how many people, not necessarily repeat, but people can just say, I've heard that too, or this was said this way to me, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so you can kind of put it all together.
Yeah, we just coalesce. That's all. Today, we're going to do that plus a little more. I have two topics here that I think all work together. Awesome. So we're just going to talk about the conversations or the things that get said that confuse type 1 and type 2 diabetes. That makes sense? Yeah. It's all going to fit. First off, somebody said, I had a long conversation with somebody who told me that type 1 and type 2 diabetes are the exact same disease. So that must be frustrating. You can cure diabetes. Now, this is a person with type 1. And I was approached by somebody who said, I heard you have diabetes. And I said, I do. And before I could get anything out, they said, well, you can cure that with diet and exercise. And then that person tried to talk and say, well, I don't have type 2 diabetes. I have type 1 diabetes. And they started trying to explain what it was. Blank stares. Person reiterated diet and exercise, walked away from them.
Yeah, that's a person that just...
They're not going to understand.
They're not willing to open the doors to start understanding and be educated, I guess. So, yeah. Yeah.
There are quite a number of people here that have been told, and this actually is interesting based on something I heard yesterday, of course, that you can't get type 1 diabetes as an adult. That just can't happen. Can you imagine another world where I said to you, you can't get the flu after your 18th birthday?
It's the same.
I mean, you're saying the same thing, right? Like why would, the
good thing is that the flu actually goes away.
I just put myself, I'm trying to put myself in the position of a person who doesn't understand. And I guess you just never really sit down and think it through closely enough to go, that doesn't make sense. Why would you not be able to get something? It really does all just hinge on it being called juvenile diabetes at some point. This one's going to go away in another generation, I think.
I would hope.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like if that's what's really, because I it's a long story that I'm not going to reiterate, but before we started talking, I was telling Jenny about Arden bumped into a type 1 in the wild yesterday, and she was with friends. And when they got home, they were talking about it. And one of her friends was a little like confused, excuse me, because the person they bumped into was in their 30s and diagnosed in their 20s. And she was like, I don't understand how she has type 1 diabetes. She was diagnosed in her 20s.
Oh, so
Yeah.
even her friend didn't really know, even though she knows your daughter really well.
Yeah.
She still didn't really know.
I got to do a 2-minute little podcast rant for her. I was like, nicely, of course, but I explained it to her. But it was just really interesting that I saw that yesterday, and now here it is in front of me so many times over. I can't develop type 1 diabetes. I'm an adult. It must be something else. Am I sure that I'm type 1? That's usually a thing kids get. Oh, this is hilarious. This is why I marked this one. This woman said, I was asked if I was sure I was type 1 because that's a thing kids get. And I replied, well, I grew up. Meaning she actually did get it when she was a kid.
Right.
She didn't go to the trouble of trying to explain it to somebody. She just tried to be funny, which I think is pretty appropriate.
And sometimes I think there are a lot of things in life that not just diabetes, but we sort of just have to have a bit of a sense of humor about, really.
Yeah. This person said that when they took their child to the hospital in DKA, no fewer than 3 people told them it's not type 1 because she had type 2 diabetes. The mom.
So the mom had type 2, so clearly the child can't have type 1. It must be type 2 because it's genetic.
I can't possibly be type 2. This is a type 2 person speaking. I'm going to mingle these together. I can't possibly be type 2 because I'm fully insulin dependent. And to boot, I was diagnosed when I was 16 with type 2 diabetes. So I can't be type 2. I've interviewed a number of people diagnosed with type 2 in their teens.
Yes.
Yeah. Huh.
And to clear it up, and may be insulin dependent. I mean, there are many people of all ages that have type 2 that are insulin dependent. That doesn't, I think it's a clear up in terms of you don't change from type 2 to type 1 just because you are now insulin dependent, right? The clarification being type 1 is an autoimmune condition. And or other things that we've talked about, I know, when we explain the differences. Yeah. Right.
This person says I was misdiagnosed as type 2 because of my age. An endocrinologist told me, oh, wow. So they had hurt their back and gained 10 pounds. The endocrinologist told her, well, because you gained 10 pounds, that tipped you over into type 2, scolded her for causing her type 2 diabetes. And that's why she's so adamant about telling people that she's type 1. Oh, that's it. Oh, no, wait a minute. Hold on. Oh, my gosh. Oh, that's really crazy. So she's very, very careful to tell people she's type 1. I'm trying to go through this in my head, like that argument that we see all the time where people are like, no, I have type 1 diabetes, right?
Right.
This situation is what she's being clear and honest right here. This situation is what made her like that. Like, so she's out in front, always like kind of telling people, I'm type 1. There's a lot of differences. She said, I don't think this, but type 2s are seen as slothful, lazy, and having brought on their own health problems. And I don't want people to think that about me. Oh, there you go. That's pretty honest. Okay.
And again, she's clarifying that she doesn't believe that. She knows the true difference and she understands. But unfortunately, that is still a very common belief that, and I think because we talk a lot about type 2 and lifestyle, right? That there's a blame that's still put into the picture when somebody's diagnosed with type 2, and it might even be self-blame, right? Somebody might not necessarily be saying it that way to you, but you may say, well, gosh, I had to have done something, right? This is all my fault, whatever. And I think that's unfair, entirely unfair. And for it to still be something that comes from a practitioner, like this person's doctor, saying, well, no, you gained weight and, shame on you. And you definitely have type 2, when clearly her documentation should state she's had type 1 for a long time. That's so horrible.
And look what it brings when you kind of set these conversations into motion in society. This person said, I hate how type 2s think they know all about type 1. Now, again, this person doesn't know every type 2 in the world, but had an experience. I got lectured by a type 2 and I had to stand there and take it. It was really difficult not to yell. So now a type 2 who sounds like had some luck with diet and exercise is now standing in front of a type 1 going, all you really got to do is go for a walk and this is going to go away. And then you get thrown in that situation. But look at the animus that it costs. That's really what I'm struck by through these, is that people get put in situations where they don't want to feel, they don't want to be told that they did something wrong. And so they start defending. And then this fight just grows and grows. And it's really interesting, isn't it?
And I think as it grows and grows, you also get the impact almost like playing telephone as a kid. Mm-hmm. You hear something from someone, you pass it on, it gets changed a little bit, it gets adjusted. Somebody else says something gets added to it. And then in the end, we're not even talking about it with any truth.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I try really hard to have these conversations because of a thing I've experienced online. And that's that when my Facebook group is called Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. And I'll tell you why. Because if I just call it Juicebox Podcast, nobody's going to know what the hell it is. Right.
Correct.
Right. It's not going to come up in searches. And if I'm being fair, I was trying to build this thing at some point. And type 1s are far more active online than type 2s are, generally speaking. But at some point, when I started having type 2s come into the group and tell me, I use insulin and this podcast is really valuable for me. I thought, do I change it? Do I turn it to Juicebox Podcast Diabetes? I can't say type 1 and type 2, and it just, it gets muddled. So I just started openly, not that I wasn't before is my point, but I started openly inviting type 2s, like, come on in. Like, I don't care what kind of diabetes you have. Sometimes, every once in a while, the pushback I get from a type 1 is like vicious. Like, don't let those people in here. I'm like, what? And then I can never really understand, like, where does that come from? And now I'm reading through these and I think, well, this is exactly where that comes from.
Correct.
Shifting slightly gears, type 1s can't possibly be overweight. Type 2s are definitely overweight. That's the heading over top of these next ones. I think the most hurtful myth is that you only have type 2 because you're overweight. And if you lose weight, you will magically be cured. Now, talk about that for a second. I mean, I do think that's a bone of contention and a sticking point where I see a lot of conversation. So if everyone who has type 2 diabetes, can they all diet and exercise it away? When you have diabetes and use insulin, low blood sugar can happen when you don't expect it. Gvoke HypoPen is a ready-to-use glucagon option that can treat very low blood sugar in adults and kids with diabetes ages 2 and above. Find out more. Go to gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used in patients with pheochromocytoma or insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk. Head now to dexcom.com/juicebox. When you get there, you're going to be met immediately with a beautiful photograph of a lovely young lady wearing a Dexcom on her arm. You're going to see how small it is. And you're going to say to yourself, ooh, I would like a Dexcom G7, thank you. And then you just get started. There's a button that says get started. So it can't really be much easier than that. I'm going to click on it so you know what happens. It asks you for some information. Name, email, address, insurance coverage, what kind of diabetes do you have? What's your therapy like? Is it insulin, MDI, pump, etc.? You hit next and you're on your way. It's going to be that easy to get yourself going with the Dexcom G7. Now, why do you care about this? Well, here's the basic reason. I'm going to swipe up on my phone right now. I've done that. I can tell you Arden's blood sugar is 121. It's fairly stable, but it's been drifting up over the past 30 minutes. I just saw that on my phone. Oh, now people are texting me. I'll put my phone down. I just saw that on my phone. But you know what's funny is I am 700 miles away from where Arden is. She's in college, and I'm in my house, and I know her blood sugar. And not just the number, but I know the speed and direction. Arden has a nice steady arrow right now, but if it was going up or going down, I would know. If her blood sugar goes under 70, I get an alarm. I set that at 70. Actually, her high alarm is 120. I get an alarm there too. You can make your alarms wherever you want. It's user definable. And how about up to 10 people can follow? What am I saying here? You, your husband, your wife, school nurse, lady up the street, anybody you want can follow blood sugar with a phone, an iPhone or an Android. Isn't this amazing? It's not magical or anything. It's like pretty basic like technology at this point. But when you couple it with knowing what your blood sugar is and the speed and direction it's moving in, well, it becomes pretty damn magical. Not only do I see Arden's blood sugar, that number, but I have an arrow that tells me if she's going up or going down and how fast she's moving. It's beautiful. And I can still help her with her meals, even at a great distance. We can look together at the graph and say, oh, you put in your insulin here, you started eating here, we saw a spike. Maybe we can change the length of your pre-bolus or the amount we're bolusing, or maybe that food needs more than you think it does. All of that is super easy, whether we're in the same room or halfway across the country. Dexcom.com/juicebox. You are going to make great decisions with the information that comes back from the Dexcom. I just know it. It is more than worth your time and effort to look into this great device. Use my link, dexcom.com/juicebox. Know the speed, direction, and number of your blood sugar or a loved one's blood sugar in just a swipe of your thumb or your finger, however you use your phone. But, that's neither here nor there.
The condition, no.
No, you have type 2 no matter what.
And I think we talked about this before, right? In terms of curing yourself of type 2 diabetes, and to be specific, if you diet and exercise yourself to a normal, healthy A1C, normal glucose levels, and you don't continue those habits, and sometimes those habits can be very significant, that the habits have to be changed in a very significant way, right? Yeah. In order to completely get off of medication, stay off of medication. If you don't stick with that, diabetes hasn't completely gone away, right? So there's no curing it. So you can't diet and exercise yourself to a cure. You can hold yourself in a tight range of, where your body is supposed to live. But overall, it's almost like it's lying in wait, right? Yeah. For lack of a better way to explain it, if you don't manage the way that you've changed things long term, it will come back. You will end up with high blood sugars again. You will end up back on medication. And is this true for everybody? Can you diet and exercise yourself completely out of medication use forever and ever and ever? No.
Okay. Yeah.
That's not the truth. You can do everything possible lifestyle-wise, and you may still at some point need some type of medication as an assistive, right? As a tool.
This isn't a perfect word, but is remission a better word? Or no, not even.
I mean, in a way, even those in remission, though, in terms of like something like cancer, for example, you can get to the point of being in remission. Do they always consider you in remission? I think so.
Let me go a different way. What if I'm strong enough to hold up 10 pounds over my head forever, right? Okay. And suddenly you throw on 10 more pounds, and now I'm holding up 20 pounds. And I struggle and struggle and struggle, and then I start kind of withering away and shrinking down to the ground. That's kind of how I imagine that. Then you come along and take off the 10 pounds. Now I can hold up the amount of weight that right. So your body can handle a certain amount of carbs and impact from food and etc. And once you give it too much to do, your blood sugars start going up. if you can take away some of that it has to do, it might be strong enough to keep you in a healthy place. And
yes.
But if you start putting the weight back on and the impacts back on, you're going to head back there again. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay.
That's fair. And again, remission wasn't necessarily, it wasn't the wrong word. It's just,
I think that there is no word is the problem.
There is no word.
Yeah.
It's a condition that's always there. You will always have to do something to manage, whether it is your choice lifestyle wise, or it is the choice to utilize medication and lifestyle changes. I mean, we also know that regardless of the type of diabetes, one little piece isn't going to manage it all. Right. So somebody who takes insulin, whether you're type 1 or type 2, you still have to do the other things.
And there are people who could eat poorly their whole lives, and it might have other impacts on them, but they might never get type 2 diabetes.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think that's the stuff that, I don't know, because that's where, look at this person was outright told, you don't have type 1 diabetes. Oh my God. All right, here's the sentence. I'm too fat to have type 1. I don't even know how to make sense of that.
Yeah.
I mean, other than I think that there's a misunderstanding about what type 2 and type 1 is.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Clearly, somebody hasn't done a good job for this person of explaining the difference and or potentially doing some testing, right? I mean, the testing from an antibody standpoint, the testing from an autoimmune standpoint is proof in that. So whether or not you're the shape, size, weight that you think goes along with a particular type of diagnosis or type of diabetes, you could have type 1 and be over the weight that's healthy for your body to manage. Yeah. You could, absolutely.
This person says, one of my biggest pet peeves is that people don't seem to understand that even with technology, you're going to have bad days with diabetes. Oh, she overheard someone at work. I overheard someone I worked for telling one of my peers, she doesn't understand what I was doing to cause my bad blood sugars because I have a CGM and a pump. And the only explanation for the highs is that she must have eaten something she wasn't supposed to. She's like, the shame around food and diet and weight and diabetes is so big.
And that's just that whole little scenario there is a cumulative of so many things that are so wrong with the beliefs that a good majority of the general public has about diabetes. So many things that are wrong in that.
Yeah. She goes on to wonder out loud, like, do other people with chronic conditions get blamed for their diagnosis and do you think people with MS or celiac or POTS, for example, are blamed for their flare-ups?
Right. Or rheumatoid arthritis
right.
or fibromyalgia or those types of things. I don't see it. I don't know I don't know exactly, but I don't see that as, in fact, many people who have celiac disease or, something similar, many people are very willing to say, hey, and in this regard, it's really important. I've gotten these gluten-free items for you. They've not touched anything. I left them in the bag so that you can enjoy at this party or this gathering, or what can we do for you? And many people with celiac would be very, very happy that somebody went the distance to do something because, again, there's not a blame in those conditions.
An endocrinologist yelled at me, I am definitely type 2 because I'm not thin as a stick. That's a quote. And young, and this person was 25 at the time. The doctor didn't even take a glance at my medical report, shamed me and lectured me during the entire session. I sat still as a rock trying not to cry, and it was traumatizing. It made it very hard for me to accept my diagnosis. And I wished and thought that I wished it would be type 2 instead of type 1 because of the way they were yelled at. It's interesting.
Which makes me, in all of these, oh my gosh, in all of these comments, so many of them are coming from healthcare practitioners.
Yeah.
And it makes me really feel like, I think last time we talked about how there are really good, clinicians out there. There are really a lot of good people who know what they're doing and who want to be helpful and are not judgmental and whatever. But unfortunately, when we talk about topics like this, all you hear about are the cruddy ones.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we didn't ask for all, everybody please send in your great examples of your doctors being terrific. But because when your doctor's terrific, you get put on a good path and you go on with your life. These are countless people. They're all singular people. They're real human beings who have these things in their head now, or know that when they're at work that someone's talking about them around the corner. This here, the person that put the list together for me said, I left just one of these for you, but the amount of people who just quoted "you don't look diabetic" as something that they've heard is astounding.
I've heard that.
Oh, you don't look diabetic.
People have said that to me before. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You don't look diabetic.
How about,
what does that look like? Purple dots, green horns? Because,
Oh my gosh. This one is interesting. It's reverse of how I usually hear it, but I was told that when I turn 18, my type 1 will become type 2 diabetes. Yeah. I didn't know that one. That's a good one.
Well, I think what struck me, honestly, with all of these comments, again, about from the clinical angle of comments, is that for the majority of your listeners, right, many of them know each other because they've gotten to know each other, but they don't live within the same area of the world. And so the number of comments is what's astounding to me. The number of comments that are coming from people who do not live right next door and could by no means have this same exact doctor. That's what's astounding, is the number of bad people that are telling unfortunate people coming in for assistance this type of BS.
All right, here it is, another one. Type 2 turns into type 1 when it gets, and I'm quoting, really bad.
Really bad.
Yeah.
And define really bad. That's not even a clinical term. This is coming from a clinician, right? Come on.
This is insulin. This is the idea of insulin. You have type 2 and someone tells you, cut back on this, go for a walk. And then you get to insulin and go, oh, it upgraded to the other one.
The bad kind.
Now you got the bad one. Now. Yeah, because one of them's good, right? My daughter was diagnosed when she was 6. I was talking as she was 9 or 10 about how her insulin needs are going up, and was told by a friend that because I'm having to increase her insulin, she must be getting insulin resistant. And now she's going to have type 1 and type 2. Both of them. She got... I don't know. I think we need to laugh a little bit. Yeah, because these are the conversations. Just imagine you're in your kitchen with your neighbor and your kid comes running in for a bolus and you offhandedly go, oh, she needs so much more insulin now that she's older. And then that's the conversation you're forced to have. Mm-hmm. Save yourself a Christmas card, I'll tell you that much.
Well, and then it brings in, for those who may not know, then it brings in the kind of the consideration, oh my goodness, is that what's happening? Mm-hmm. Is there a problem? My child or my teen is using so much more insulin than we used to use. Is this normal? How much insulin should my child or my teen be using? Even adults, how much insulin? I see comments a lot. How much insulin does your child who's 12 years old use? That is irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's entirely irrelevant. Your 12-year-old versus your person down the street's 12-year-old, their insulin needs are going to be their insulin needs. Do not compare.
Yeah, never, honestly. I get annoyed with my type 2 friends who tell me that they have to take insulin now. So now they're also type 1. So it's the same idea we were just talking about, but it's from a different perspective. So that means that if that person has type 2 diabetes, they're seeing a physician. The physician moves them to insulin, and they believe they now have type 2 and type 1 diabetes. How is someone not making that clear to them that that's not the case?
Because there's a lack of explanation coming from the clinical side. Unless again, I know that there are some clinicians who clearly are confused and may have said, now you have type 1 because you're using insulin. But I think in the office space there, it's the explanation that we have to take the next step. If you were trying to achieve normalized glucose levels, these medications, these changes you've made, they are not working. We do need to add insulin into the picture to assist and to get your blood sugars down, and understand that this does not mean that you have type 1. You still have type 2, but you are now insulin requiring. I mean, there are even diagnostic codes that go along with the particular, types of diabetes. So I guarantee they haven't changed your diagnostic code to now being type 1 diabetes. But from an explanation standpoint, that person needs to be told that by the person who is kind of in charge, right?
Listen, here's why it's important. This is a little short story. I was misdiagnosed and I was getting that feeling like I need to change doctors. So I advocated for myself and I went to a different practice. If I didn't do that, I probably wouldn't be alive today. This is a type 1. I was told to do better by the first doctor. I was eating salads 2 times a day, working out during my lunch hour at work. And despite all of my efforts, of course, I'd wake up between 300 and 600 every day because she's got type 1 and nobody's giving her insulin. I had this lovely type 2 coworker who pulled me aside and said, "You do not have type 2 diabetes." And I truly believe that this woman saved my life. She told me, "We don't have fasting numbers like the way you guys will." Right. So oh God, she died shortly after our conversation, but I think she saved my life. I'll never forget her. Oh, geez, now I'm going to cry. Damn it. It's Monday. Don't cry on Monday, Scott. It sets the whole week wrong. I weighed 142 pounds at that point while the doctor was shaming me for my type 2 diabetes, which I didn't have. Kept telling me I needed a massive lifestyle change and that losing 5 pounds would be a big help. 142 pounds is...
Wow.
How tall would you have to be for 142 pounds to be bad on your frame? 3 feet tall? Like, that's a very reasonable weight for a woman, isn't it?
It's a very reasonable weight.
Yeah, what are we talking about? Tell her to lose 5 pounds. Jeez, look at me. I'm crying. Hold on a second. Oh. This podcast is killing me. Hold on. Jesus Christ. That made me sad. Okay. All right, hold on. Damn it. Pull it together, Scott.
I didn't cry, by the way.
Jenny's
just for everybody listening.
I've heard this one too many times. Also, Jenny lives in the Midwest. She's very tough. If it got as cold here as it does where you live, I'd cry just for that. There's a lot of stories here about people who now, because of this stuff happening, they keep their stuff so private. Like, I said earlier, like type 2s don't seem to be online at the same way type 1s are. And I firmly believe, from my experience, that it really the one thing that allows type 1s to be open about their diabetes is that they can say, "I did not do this to myself." And it's right. It's a thing that happened to me. Meanwhile, that's not, honestly, I don't see it that way. And I don't think they do either. I don't think they're saying, I'm saying that what I've seen is that type 2s seem to be private, and I think for obvious reasons that are being shared here. And it's very nice of these people to share these things with us. But I see where type 1s can kind of get the day pass to, do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
I do.
Yeah.
I think it also goes along with, there's a lot of misinformation, obviously, which we've talked a lot about, but from a type 2 standpoint, I think diagnosed, especially as an adult or an older adult, you may have been managing so many things in your life already just on your own, that this is another thing that's added to the list. Mm-hmm. And, you didn't tell your neighbor that you had bunions. So why would you tell them that you now have type 2 diabetes?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's even like, online where people are anonymous if they want to be, it still doesn't happen. Correct. Really.
Right.
This is lovely. I found this podcast while I was being told I was a bad and non-compliant type 2. Obviously, there are misconceptions always about type 2, but this group is impressive how it helps people. It says,
Aw.
there's so many people here to help. That's nice. And how to use insulin properly and regardless of type 1 or type 2. Oh, that's nice. I'm glad.
That is very nice.
Yeah. When my daughter was first diagnosed, we had to drop something off at Girl Scouts. One of the ladies first told her to take herbs to cure her diabetes. I explained that wouldn't work. She said, I understand how it works. I used to be type 1 as a child, and now I'm type 2.
Oh, good. So the herbs clearly fixed the pancreatic problem. But now what are you doing? What is this person doing like wrong, quote unquote, right? Now that they have just type 2 diabetes, hasn't it? Come on.
She went on to tell her, to the kid, you'll be type 2 one day unless you cure it now.
What?
It was my last one. I was keeping that for the end.
I have no comment. I don't know what to say to that.
Get on it, lady.
It's just absurd. I don't know. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, that's okay. The Forrest Gump guy said it, right? What did he say? Stupid is, stupid does.
There you go. Yeah. Stupid is, stupid is.
All right, Jenny. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. I also want to thank Dexcom and remind you that at my link, dexcom.com/juicebox, you get started right now with the G7. You will not be disappointed. I mean, that's my opinion, of course. Yours might vary, but it's why are people texting me so much? Dear Lord, I'm working. Dexcom.com/juicebox. Links in the show notes. Links at juiceboxpodcast.com. Hold on for a message, and then you can leave. I mean, you can leave now if you want. You're a completely autonomous person. You can do whatever you want. But if you wait, who knows? If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, the Bold Beginnings series from the Juicebox Podcast is a terrific place to begin listening. In this series, Jenny Smith and I will go over the questions most often asked at the beginning of type 1. Jenny is a certified diabetes care and education specialist who is also a registered and licensed dietitian, and Jenny has had type 1 diabetes for 35 years. My name is Scott Benner, and I am the father of a child who has type 1 diabetes. Our daughter Arden was diagnosed in 2006 at the age of 2. I believe that at the core of diabetes management, understanding how insulin works and how food and other variables impact your system is of the utmost importance. The Bold Beginnings series will lead you down the path of understanding. The series is made up of 24 episodes, and it begins at episode 698 in your podcast or audio player. I'll list those episodes at the end of this. To listen, you can go to juiceboxpodcast.com, go up to the menu at the top and choose Bold Beginnings, or go into any audio app like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and then find the episodes that correspond with the series. Those lists again are at Juicebox Podcast up in the menu, or if you're in the private Facebook group, in the featured tab. The private Facebook group has over 40,000 members. There are conversations happening right now and 24 hours a day that you would be incredibly interested in. So don't wait. Check out the Bold Beginnings series today and get started on your journey. Episode 698 defines the Bold Beginnings series. 702, honeymooning. 706, adult diagnosis. 711 and 712 go over diabetes terminologies. In episode 715, we talk about fear of insulin. In 719, the 15-15 rule. Episode 723, long-acting insulin. 727, target range. 731, food choices. 735, pre-bolus. 739, carbs. 743, stacking. 747, flexibility. In episode 751, we discuss school. In episode 755, exercise. 759, guilt, fears, hope, and expectations. In episode 763 of the Bold Beginnings series, we talk about community. 772, journaling. 776, technology and medical supplies. Episode 780, treating low blood glucose. Episode 784, dealing with insurance. 788, talking to your family. And episode 805, illness and ketone management. Check it out. It will change your life. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Jenny, for being on this episode of the podcast. You can find Jenny at integrateddiabetes.com. Anyway, back to it. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.